story days. All right. How are you doing?
We're good to go.
We're good to go? All right. So Twin Oaks is an egalitarian community, and what that means, egalitarian is actually a tricky word because different people make it mean different things. One thing that it means is that all work is evaluated the same. So I'm one of the general managers of the hammocks business, which is our second largest business, a multi-million-dollar business. And the time that I spend managing the hammocks business is worth exactly the same as the time I spend cleaning the bathroom in my residence, right? So 1 hour cleaning the bathroom, 1 hour of managing the multi-million-dollar business, right? 1 hour of cooking that Willow does is evaluated the same as 1 hour of recruiting that I might do. An hour is an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing is that we didn't start that way. We started following the B.F. Skinner model from Walden 2, where he thought, oh, what we'll do is we'll incentivize people to take on difficult jobs. So if bathroom cleaning is unpopular, we'll give 1.1 labor credits for it, and if we have too many cooks, then we'll give 0.9 labor credits for that for an hour's worth of work. And what we found that was super interesting was that when we got to be about size 40 people, there was no such thing as universally popular work, and no such thing as universally unpopular work. And even the tiniest movements, if you would just give 1.1 hours for toilet cleaning, you'd have way too many toilet cleaners. And if you gave 0.9 labor credits for an hour's worth of cooking, your cooks would go on strike. So we were forced into this philosophically desirable place of all work being evaluated the same. One of the things that we have is we have a graduated pension program. So when you reach age 50, your quota goes down an hour every year. So I'm 62, so my quota, instead of being 42 hours, is 29 hours. It keeps going down. And if you're unable to work, then we take you off the labor system. So going back to this one slide that's up here, the basic agreement, you work your 42 hours, and the community covers all of your costs of living: education, entertainment, housing, food, clothing, medical, transportation, all of it. Right? You get $100 a month allowance to cover the things that we don't cover, which is spent on chocolate, alcohol, and sometimes cigarettes for people who do that. But basically, you're trusting this large institution to cover your needs. And I think we do.
What would happen if you wanted to go to a college out of state, or where it was, you had to have room and board? Would that be allowed?
The community sends our kids to school. This is one of the internal values. Every kid who's wanted to go to college, who grew up in the community, has gone to that college. The community doesn't say, oh, we will cut a check for whatever the tuition is. What it does instead is it says, we are like a financial aid office on steroids, right? Like, we will make sure that we have scholarship and funding from the community and grants and whatever it takes to make sure that that our kids get to go whatever choice of schools they get to go. They won't go to. So we've been doing that for a long time. One way you can think about Twin Oaks is that it is a network of libraries, right? Like the most interesting piece of the John Lennon song here is the Imagine No Possessions piece, right? Like this is the piece, particularly in Materialist America, that's super difficult for people to get their brains wrapped around. What Twin Oaks does is it says, we're going to have all these libraries, and you can pop into these libraries and take whatever you like. And if you look at this list, right, like it covers a whole bunch of stuff that you might need. So tools, cars, bikes, clothes, books, videos, music, gym equipment, recreational equipment, all of that stuff. And it gets to this idea that has recently been made popular by ride services like Uber and Lyft, of the difference between ownership and access, right? So, do you really need to have your own car? Well, yeah, I really want to have my own car. I want to be able to get in and go wherever I want to go. Well, what people in urban areas are finding increasingly is actually having cars a bit of a nightmare. And what they want is they want car services. They want to be able to push a button on their phone and for a car to show up and then for them to go to where they want. And then a car goes away and it's all the headaches associated with parking and all of that stuff all goes away. And what Twin Oaks is really doing, and if there's one idea that you take take away from this presentation. What Twin Oaks is doing is challenging the idea of personal ownership. And it says, you don't actually need to own the clothes that you're wearing. You need clothes services. You don't need to own the kitchen and the refrigerator and all the food in it. What you want is food services. And I'm super happy that there are 2 meals a day that are prepared because I'm a terrible cook. Right? I don't want to have to depend on my own food services.
Well, what if you like cooking?
He's a great cook. He makes food all the time. He makes food for me sometimes. Right? And there are satellite kitchens around the community, so that's possible.
I have a dumb question about the ownership thing. Is it still a rule that you're not allowed to have like a personal TV?
So there is a long-standing prohibition on live broadcast television in the community, right? And when the internet came in, and we got a fractional T1 line, I put up a paper that says, is T1 equal to TV? Right? And we have all kinds of justifications for why we don't have broadcast television in the community. The one that I find most compelling is that it's a social toxin, right? Like if you have your own TV, then instead of being in a public space, you're in your little room and you're watching your little TV.
Commercials.
And commercials, da, da, da. And when I put up this paper, I knew the response was going to be, we want our internet. We don't care if T1 is somehow similar to TV. We'll come up with all kinds of justifications for, there's no commercials, you're choosing what you're watching, blah, 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 blah.
You can still be out in the group when you're doing it.
You can still be out in the group when you're doing it. And there is still a ban on broadcast television, but it doesn't matter so much anymore because almost all broadcast television is ending up on the internet, and there's internet everywhere. There's Wi-Fi in all the residences and a bunch of the other buildings. So
To take this to the absurd level,
Cable sucks compared to internet. Okay.
to take this to the absurd level, if you don't own your clothes and I say, gee, I'd like that shirt.
Well, if you say that to me, in fact, you don't even have to say that. If you say, that's a nice shirt, my response is going to be, would you wear it? And if you say yes, I will take it off my back and hand it to you. But that's just my peculiar behavior. And the thing that I want to say about the libraries, is that it's not, we're not orthodox about this idea of ownership versus access. And clothes is a great example, right?
Yeah.
So, who owns this shirt is actually an open question.
Yeah.
We have a dual system, right? Like if this is my favorite, I got this shirt out of Common Clothes. We have a big clothes library. I got this shirt out of Common Clothes. And if I decide that this is my favorite shirt, I can keep it forever. I just have to wash it myself, right? Because Common Clothes has its own industrial clothes washing thing. And if I don't want to wash this shirt, I just throw it in the Common Clothes laundry. Somebody else washes it, somebody else dries it, somebody else puts it up in Common Clothes. They fix it if I mess it up. And that's super handy, right? Like if you're not obsessed with fashion or you don't need to have particularly soft clothes or these kinds of things, this is a giant service, not having to do your own laundry. And who owns it is really a secondary question, right? I'm currently using it. At the point at which I give it back to Common Clothes, you might use it. If I never give it back to Common Clothes, I guess it's mine. Does it matter? What matters is I've got clothes services, and you've got clothes services, clean clothes services.
So a new member comes in, do they just hand over their wardrobe or their car, any of the possessions that they have?
So this gets to the cult question, right? So you're a cult, right? Okay, so there are things that typify cults. Super important to know. Living charismatic leader. You give them everything that you own. They don't want you to maintain your contacts with your friends and family, and you can't leave when you want to leave, right? That's what makes a cult. So in the late 1960s, when Twin Oaks was founded, it was the same period of time that the cult movement in the United States was exploding, right? And so we said, we want to make sure that we are as different from those people as possible. So when you come to Twin Oaks to do a visitor period, you come and stay with us for 3 weeks, you work as though you're a member, you go through a whole bunch of orientations, and then you have to go away. You have to go away for at least a month. And during that month, after 10 days, we will tell you, congratulations, you've been accepted. We accept about 75% of the people who apply for membership. And then you have to spend 3 weeks with your friends and family, convincing them that you're not out of your mind for moving to this commune in the country with all these hippies. And if they can't convince you, then you get to come to us. But we're not trying to break your relationship. They're always welcome to come by, and you can leave whenever you like. And we are an income-sharing community. We are not an asset-sharing community. So if you have a car, and you have a house, and you have other things, those are your things. We don't want those things. unearned income, then the community will ask for for interest income. But it's not heavily policed. We have our own businesses, we have our own internal economy. We're not accepting you because you have a lot of stuff. And then what started your question was, when I get there, what do I do with all my stuff? Well, your stuff fits in your room, and what we find is, at first, people are like, oh, these are all my things. And then as time goes by, it's like, I don't need these things. I can put these things in. I want the space in my room for things other than my clothes. And some people have their favorite things, and they keep their favorite things, and take some things from comic clothes from the collective. That's fine.
I just have a question, like, how the libraries work. So, like, if you had a closed library, why would you need, like, a wardrobe, for instance?
Well, you might have some particular garment that is your favorite, something that you like to be dressed up in. You might be a strange size, right? Like you might have big feet or something. You might have clothes that you want to keep as your own personal possession. Most people do a mix. Most people do some of comic clothes and some of their own personal stuff. And what happens with time is people tend to move more and more towards the collective solution as they become convinced that it works.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd be more like, okay, yes, I like this closed library. I'm only gonna store what I really, 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 really like.
Well, it's interesting. So one of the things that we struggle with in community is how do you deal with hoarding? Right? Like, here's this giant closed library with all these things. Oh, that's nice. I'll take all these things. And I'm going to put them in my room, right? So the way we deal with hoarding in terms of commie clothes, in terms of the closed library, is that the people who work there, who do the cleaning and the sorting and the fixing and all that stuff, they have another job. And one of their jobs is to play this mind game on ourselves, where they go out into the world and they find new things and they bring them back and they display them prominently. So whenever you go up to common clothes, it's like, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's new. There's always nice new things here at common clothes. So I don't need to hoard this stuff in my room. I'll just do my shopping here. And this is the idea of having these libraries that are compelling enough so that you don't have to have your own personal stash is key to this idea of ownership versus access.
Well, what I would mean is I would just store like my favorite shirt at home, and then like whenever you say, oh, that's nice, you can just wear it for a day, and whenever you don't want to wear it, just put it back.
And that's exactly what most people do. So Twin Oaks is quite interested in sustainability. We have a bunch of internal sustainability infrastructure. Some of the coming slides are going to compare how we relate to the average U.S. American. We have an all-volunteer economy. That means with the exception of that one dishwashing shift, people are doing the things that they say that they want to do. Not only am I a terrible cook, when I go into the garden, I pull out the things that are plants and I leave behind the things that are weeds, so they don't let me in the garden, right? But I don't want to go. So Twin Oaks is a full functioning village. So it has all of these different aspects to it, and you can find the work that you want to do inside of this village. The question came up before, what are the businesses? So we currently have 7 businesses: hammocks, tofu, indexing books. We sell organic seeds. We run conferences. We have a contract service business that I actually run, which is currently mostly doing construction work. So we send out construction teams to do different aspects. We also sell ornamental flowers. And then I'm not going to read that long list below, but those are all the different kinds of domestic work things that we can do.
So how does the 10 hours of work expected from younger people work?
So I'm going to tell a funny story about my son, who's in the room. So the 10 hours of work so kids' principal jobs are their education, right? And so if you go to public school, then you have a low quota during the school year, and it goes up some during the summer. But if you're homeschooled like Willow was, then you have a quota that stays the same all through the year, and it starts at age 5. And at age 5, you have 1 hour a week responsibility to the community. And when Willow turned 5, he said,
7.
Is it 7?
Yeah.
7. He said, tell me all the jobs. And this was a very long conversation. This whole long conversation, Will was like, no. And then I said, and you can do interviews. They said, we have academics and media people coming all the time and they want to talk to our kids and none of our kids want to talk to them. You can talk to the media and academics for labor credits. You get labor credits for talking? I said, yes. He said, sign me up. So the next week, a film crew from NYU came down. They mic'd Willow up and they said, Willow, what do you have to say to the world? He said, more trees, less cars. They said, oh, that's great. What else do you have to say to the world? He said, get that right and come back and talk to me again. And that was the end of his interview career for 7 years until Al Jazeera came and he talked with them about video games. But in getting back to the answer to your question, kids' labor credits, labor requirements slowly increase with time, sort of the opposite of pension. And they choose the areas that they work in, and Willow has chosen mostly to
Wait,
work.
so you actually work and don't just do school?
Yes. Right now, Willow's doing about 2 dinner shifts, which is 5 hours each, so 10 hours of labor a week. You had a question?
Oh, yeah, I was wondering if you have like a favorite job on the community, can you stick to that area?
Yes, though in some cases you have to share. Like I like giving tours, and we have a regular Saturday tour. So I'm part of a group of tour guides, and every 2 or 3 weeks I'll get a Saturday tour. In some other area, I'm also one of the personal shoppers for the community. And I have a regular day of the week that I go, on Thursdays I go out and I do the shopping for everyone. We'll talk a little bit more about this. But generally speaking, you're able to, part of egalitarianism is being able to there's no men's work or women's work. People get to do the kinds of work that they're excited about if the community offers it.
Speaking of which, we're going to touch a little bit on the gender culture.
Sure, I can. Let me blast through this.
That's what Co said.
Right. So this slide is a little bit dated. We're over 50 years old now. We have 485 acres. The ferret is gone. We have 17 passenger vehicles, about $1.5 million in the bank. We grow about 70% of our produce. We have a big 2.5-acre organic production garden, which we put 10,000 hours into a year, which is 5-person years of our labor goes into that garden. And then 2-person years goes into food processing, storing, canning, that kind of stuff. And then we're 20% of the carbon footprint. And this is the other reason why you should take this seriously, right? Like, so why does this matter? Who cares? A bunch of hippies living in the woods doesn't make any difference, right? So when Trump is not blowing up the headlines, the sort of persistent crisis of the time is climate disruption. Often it's called climate change, right? And the UN has the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which produces incredibly depressing reports. If you really want to get bummed out, I suggest you read their stuff. But one of the things that they say consistently is that wealthy countries and industrializing countries, like the United States, need to cut our carbon footprint by 80%, by 2050, they're saying, to avoid catastrophic climate change. This is a huge task, right? Like, how are you going to cut your carbon footprint by 80%? What are you going to stop eating 4 out of 5 meals? You're going to stop driving 4 out of 5 trips? You're going to stop buying 4 out of 5 things that you buy? Right? Like that's a big ask. Right? So if you look at this, you will see where Twin Oaks shows up in terms of our carbon footprint. Right? So for miles driven, we're at about 17% of the average U.S. American. For electricity use, we're at 24%. For propane, 17, landfill, 19, natural gas, income, and it's the last one that is the big clue. How is it that we are able to do all of this miraculous climate change work? And what the key is, we're poor. But we're not poor and disorganized. We're actually poor and super strategic about it, right? So if you take a look at cars, right, the average group of 100 U.S. Americans has 80 cars. We have 17. So are we meeting the transportation needs of the community with those 17 vehicles? Well, if you take a look at what the U.S. Americans use cars for, the number 1 use is commuting to work. We live and work in the same place. The number 2 use is discretionary shopping. You get home from work, you look at the refrigerator, there's nothing there, you drive to 7-Eleven, you get pizza. So we have town trippers 6 days of the week, somebody goes into Louisa, this is one of the jobs that I like and have, with a whole stack of things that people want, including that pizza. And I go out and I do the shopping for everybody. I do centralized shopping, right? So if you're a member at Twin Oaks, you have a personal shopper. Do you have a personal shopper? No, you don't. You know who has a personal shopper? Beyonce. Beyonce has a personal shopper, and I have a personal shopper, right? Like, this is how the community solves problems by using its ability to self-organize, right?
Yeah, I'd like a TV.
Medical coverage, I mean,
Medical coverage is also in the mix, and has long been. And the community, and there's so much that can be said. The medical coverage sort of comes in several different aspects. One of it is it's an incredibly healthy lifestyle, right? So people are outside, they're moving around, they're eating organic food. Stress is way down, right? Like, if you can pull stress out of your mix as somebody living in the industrial world, your incidence of health problems goes way down. Then there's all kinds of naturopathic and health solutions inside of the community, and then we are blessed with nearby teaching medical school, UVA in Charlottesville, and because our income is so low, the last line here, we qualify for indigent care, and that handles a whole bunch of stuff. And now Medicare is coming in and taking and replacing that, and we're shifting over to a Medicare-based situation.
How many members do you have now in their 70s or 80s that are?
We have members in our 70s and 80s. My dear friend Coyote is 77. He's been there for 20 years, and he's been off the labor system for the last 5 years. It hasn't been possible for him to work, but he's still. He likes to say he's painted himself into the perfect little corner.
Do you know what the percentage is of people
Who are in their 70s?
Yeah, like 70s, 80s.
There's 2 people who are in their 80s. There are 4 people in their 70s. 6 or 7 people in their 60s. The big humps actually are 20 to 30 and 40 to 50. Right? So people come when they finish college or high school and they're interested in something different, or they come when their kids go away or their career is done. And those are the spikes. So it's sort of bipolar distribution. I keep flying through this. That's a nice public relations picture. People who need an intern, those are our raspberries. All right. So people come to communities for all kinds of different reasons. One of the most popular is, turns out I hate bosses. Where is there a place that I can go and live and have no bosses? We're pretty good at that. We have managers in areas. The hammock shop manager is important, is responsible for training people. They're responsible for making sure that the supplies are there. They're responsible for making sure that things are done safely. Quality is okay. But they don't fire people. And they don't give raises. And this turns out to be super important in terms of people's relationship with their bosses. People don't want to get fired. People don't want to have to be performing to somebody else's expectations. Guaranteed housing, food, clothing, work, low climate impact, distributed decision making. Right, so this came up with this was how do you avoid charismatic leaders? The internal culture is really good at beating down anybody who thinks they might want to be a charismatic leader. We cut the heads off the sunflowers.
I want to be a charismatic leader. Go kill yourself.
We have a planner-manager system that was actually taken from the Walden 2 book. The moral of the story is, don't design your governance system on a B-rated science fiction book. The manager, what makes you a manager is you have an area that you're responsible for and you have budgets. Right? You have a money budget and you have a labor budget. Right? So as the marketing manager and the general manager and the marketing manager for the hammocks business, I have some hundreds of hours and some thousands of dollars with which I can do advertising and promotions and these kinds of things. And you know, theoretically, I'm accountable to the community. Somebody could say, like, I wanna see the details, and we produce reports and put stuff out. But largely, the businesses are self-contained, and the people who run them are responsible to the other people who are in the business in terms of accountability.
What's an example though where, do things get brought up to a vote? I mean, is there, for a new project or something money needs, and who decides that?
So yes, and there's very little that's done with simple majority, right? So Twin Oaks was founded in '67, which is before the feminists had taken the Quaker process of consensus and turned it into the secular decision-making process that is very popular in the progressive and left-leaning groups in the United States. So Twin Oaks said, we don't want to vote on things. We don't want a regular majority making decisions. We need to do better than that. And we don't want to require everybody to agree. Yeah, this was before we were 100 people. This was back when we were 30 and 40. So what we have is sort of a super majority process. Like more than half of the people have to think it's a good idea for us to do something different from what it was that we were doing before. And the problem is that it's not a fixed number. And sometimes a loud minority of people can stop something from happening. And we sort of feel like that's better than being in the 50-50, can pass by a single vote kind of thing. The exception to this is some of the membership stuff that we do. Particularly if you're going to be expelled from the community, if you've violated one of the bylaws, it takes 10 people to start an expulsion process, and then it takes 25% of the membership to, if 25% of the membership thinks you should leave, then that could enforce you.
I'm just wondering how much it actually costs to live at Twin Oaks.
Doesn't cost anything. So you work your 42 hours, and that is your commitment to the community.
Good work.
Yeah. So you pay in labor.
Sometimes I was a therapist, and I could do jobs like cooking or something, but what if my profession was not something that was met on your, would I be able to go like into Louisa and then come back, and that would, every day or something?
You could. There's a gal who's joining right now named Clementine, and she does public health work, and she just got a job that's 3 days a week. You wouldn't, and that's unusual.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really want to live in the community if you had a 5-day-a-week job outside, because you'd miss so much of the benefits. So, but in answer to your more specific question, if you wanted to continue to do your therapy work, you could set it up so that you did it, and you could do it in one of two ways. You could do it where the money that was coming to you would then go to the community, and then you would get labor credits, and that labor credit would include, your preparation time and your commuting time and your taxes and whatever other kinds of time. Or you could keep the money as long as you were making your 42-hour-a-week quota, right? So one of the hard things, right? I want to tell you there are reasons why it's not utopia. Like one of the hard things about living in community is that even though we've figured out internally how not to live with money, how there's very little money in internal use, as soon as you walk off the farm, everybody else thinks money is super important. And if you don't have it, then you're perhaps not super important. And so being able to make more money than the $100-a-week stipend is actually important for a lot of people, to be able to travel, to be able to do things, to acquire things that the community doesn't provide. So some people have part-time external work, and part of my job in the contract services work is to be able to create situations in which people don't have to find the job, they just have to come to me and say, hey Pax, I want to go to Europe this summer. You got something for me? And then I help place them in jobs.
With jobs, you help place where they can earn additional money for a personal project like travel.
Yes.
Great.
He's also a travel man.
We have 15 people going to construction jobs next week. Or 15 shifts, 15-person days of construction work.
Off-site.
Off-site.
Do a lot of people work more than 42 hours?
Yes. Willow was explaining this before, you have what's called a vacation balance. And you have to work an average of 42 hours a week, and then if you work 42 hours a week, then you have qualified for 3 weeks of vacation a year. But I want to say several things because this spins people's head around. First is there are 10 paid holidays, right? What you call Valentine's Day, what we call Validation Day, New Year's, the community's anniversary in June, your personal birthday is a paid holiday, so you wake up in the morning, you've got 6 hours that day. Your anniversary of joining the community is also a personal holiday, you wake up that day. But more important than that is that only 40% of the work that you do is income generating work, right? So cooking, cleaning, building maintenance, gardening, milking the cows, taking care of kids, all of those things that I'm guessing they're giving you nothing for is the majority of your quota at Twin Oaks. So when you're saying, oh, well, I'm working 37 hours at Pizza Hut, I don't want to go work 42 hours, it's not the same. The Pizza Hut, the income equivalent work is going to be less than 20 hours. Most people who live in the community spend less than half of their time generating income for the community, and most of their time doing domestic work, or like this is labor creditable for me. The drive out here is labor creditable. All of that, this is part of what it takes to run the community, is to give public presentations about it, right? So that's in the mix.
What if you're not a morning person? Can you, and you want to do hammocks, can you work into the evening? I mean, is it flexible on this?
Hammock shop's open 24/7. I can tell you, I'll see you there at midnight. You can sleep in every morning, right? Like up there with no bosses is probably no alarm clocks, right? People come to the community because they want to shift their life away from being told by machines or whatever. And Willow Calta is actually is coaching the U.S. Olympic team on sleeping in.
A lot of 17-year-olds.
Yes. Please.
When I was younger, I wasn't much older than Willow at this time. I did a lot of traveling because, you know, as I do back in the 70s, we could travel a little bit better and thumbs worked.
Hitchhiking, absolutely.
Thumbs worked very well.
Yeah.
I stayed for a summer, I don't know if you've heard it, the farm in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Still around.
We've been there.
Because I looked up some of their stuff and I had,
Still around.
okay, I didn't know.
They're still there, but they're quite different than they were.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Compared to the two situations, that's the only one that I've ever known. Because I spent a good chunk of the summer there. I was young, so the rules they took me in. I mean, I didn't stay in the community the whole time, but I got to spend like weekends and stuff. I stayed up at the guest house most of the
I
time.
think they used to be strictly vegetarian or vegan or
Right.
something, and I don't know if they're still that way.
Well, and most of their source income was all in the timber industry back when I went.
And then they started tofu, actually. They pioneered tofu, which we also do now.
Right. They had radio stations.
I'm gonna answer the
and
question now.
that. So comparatively, are you basically the same
We're
style? or-
very different. They started with a charismatic leader model,
Okay.
and they grew in a way that we've never grown. In the 80s, there were 1,600 people there.
Yeah,
Okay.
And they used the Mother Teresa model, which was, if you're a single mom, we want you, right? And Twin Oaks is like, if you're a single mom, there's a bunch of process. Maybe if you're extraordinary, maybe we want you. Twin Oaks controls the number of families that we have because we have a super generous child care program. We only have one kid for every 5 adults. Whereas the farm was like, we will take everybody.
Right.
And
That's what I was wondering.
And they were super, I want to point out that they were super successful for a couple of decades. When they had more than 1,000 members, they were bringing in tremendous income. They were sending ambulances both to Central America and to the South Bronx, right? Like they were opening up satellite offices and doing public service work for free, both in the U.S., in poor places in the United States, and in Central America, in a super impressive way. And what I think went wrong with the farm is they have a very unforgiving membership process. You have to live there for a long time, and you're sort of in limbo as to whether or not you're going to be able to be a member for a long time. And what this resulted is the farm sort of decentralizing. People still being affiliated with the farm, but living nearby rather than being in it. And now there are fewer than 100 people. Still doing some interesting stuff, but it's a much smaller operation than it was.
Which is actually a good side note that Twin Oaks is not the only one.
Well, no, this is, so there are 2,000 organizations in the United States that identify as intentional communities. About half of them are spiritually oriented, and about half of them are secular. And what makes you an intentional community, which should be your first question, is you are self-selecting, right? Like the people who live there are deciding that they want to live with you. You don't give your credit application to a landlord or a property manager. It's the people who you're going to be with choose. And then after you're chosen, there's what it is that you're sharing, right? So it might be a washing machine or a couple meals a week, or test files if you're a college co-op, or that's sort of one extreme, is the relatively small amount of sharing. Or at the very other end, there's us. If it's possible to share it, we're sharing. And that's part of what makes Twin Oaks the radical experiment. But if we are too radical for you, but community life sounds interesting, I would encourage you to go to ic.org, or intentionalcommunity.org, which has a listing of over 800 mostly secular communities in the United States, that are, most of which are looking for members. And also a bunch of information on how to start.
I thought it was very interesting life. I mean, I was young, I was much, about Willow's age, I was 17, you might be 18, so couldn't vote, couldn't do nothing, but it was very interesting lifestyle, and that was in the 70s, so they hadn't kind of reached their max. They were still rather small when I was there at the time.
Yeah. And if you want to come to Twin Oaks, you can, CB can give you my contact information, but it's the joke that I like to make is that in the future, email addresses will be so predictive that if you guess, you will guess right. And I already live in the future, so it's Paxus, which is my first name, Paxus, at twinoaks.org. So if you're to guess my email, that's probably what you guess. But CB can also get in touch. We do a communities conference in August that you are highly encouraged to come to, where about 50 communities come, and
What month?
it's called a communities conference. It's over the Labor Day weekend, actually, end of August, beginning of September.
It's
Do you
amazing.
have a website where you can buy a hammock?
Yes, we have a website where, in fact, there's a St. Patrick's Day sale going on
Oh,
right
well, there you go.
20% off green hammocks. It's twinoakshammocks.com.
Okay.
And then, so if you just put Twin Oaks Hammocks into a search engine, it'll
Everything else will pop up. Like,
yeah, if you put Twin Oaks Hammocks in, some of like Wayfair and Hayneedle, which sell our stuff and pay more for advertising than we do, will come up first. So put it in twinoakshammocks.com, and that's how you'll get the best.
I have a tip for you.
You have a tip.
When you say your
So,
email,
you
don't
know-
say orgy, say org.
Other questions for me or for Willow?
You talked about how being in a communal living situation has changed the social design. What has it affected in the physical infrastructure as well? Like, do you design the structures on the property to be more communal, and how does that look?
What a great question. So, how does living collectively affect architecture and village planning? So one of the things that we made a decision on very early on was that we were not going to all live in the same building. We were going to have separate residences. But what we didn't want those residences being sub-communities that were separate from the rest of the community. We wanted to make sure that whenever we built a building, that it was reasonable for any member of the community to be in that building. And so the way we did it is we put public services in every residence. So in one residence, there's a wood shop. And in another residence, there's a musical instrument library. And in another residence, there's recreational equipment. In another residence, there's a big double tub. In another residence, there's thousands of books. So you would never be surprised to see somebody who didn't live in your building, because there's a good reason for them to be there. The other thing that communities have learned is around spacing of buildings. And if you're trying to create an interactive community where the people who are there are engaged with each other, you want to have certain common functions, like we have a big centralized kitchen and dining area. There's also a meeting space that brings people together all the time. But keeping the walking distances between buildings relatively short. Like, don't require people to bike or to drive to get from one end of campus to the other. Make it walkable is super important for social engagement.
I didn't know if you were gonna touch on it with the structures, but it's important to note that, I believe it's still true, everyone has to have their own bedroom. I mean, they don't have to live in their own bedroom, but every person has,
Right, so this
A personal
is pretty common in the intentional communities movement, is that every individual has their own bedroom. What couples do with some regularity is, we're gonna sleep in this room, and this other room is gonna be our study. But if they were to split up, they would still have rooms. And kids from about age 1 on have their own room at Twin Oaks. And we find that's, they're not big rooms, right? But going back to the dark side, why do people leave? Like the reason that people leave is they don't feel like they have enough privacy, or they don't feel like they have enough personal space, right? Like the space that they control themselves. You have your room, that's super important, but it may not be enough. It may turn out that you have more things that you don't want disturbed by other people than will fit in your room.
It occurs to me that for thousands of years, there were indigenous people who called hunter-gatherers that had similar kind of organizational structure as yours. Do you see similarities? Do you know about those, and do you see similarities?
I mean, so the reason that people come to beyond no bosses and no alarm clocks, one of the big reasons that people come to community is, my family didn't work out, or my town is filled with jerks. I wanna be a tribe. I wanna find my tribe. And lots of people come to community because they're looking for like-minded individuals who they're gonna build bonds with, right? Like in the biography, it talks about the fact that I actually live in 2 communities. I live in Toronto, which is a big, successful community, and you can point to lots of the infrastructure stuff. But the most interesting work that I'm actually doing is in the tiny community that I'm involved with. And that interesting work is not, we're doing things that are sustainable and all that kind of stuff. But the interesting work is the interpersonal work. And particularly the stuff that we're doing around what's called Dream Alliance, where if you are a member of this small community that I'm part of, you have an obligation to share with the community what your personal dreams are, and the community has an obligation to support you in that, right? And if you don't happen to know what your personal dreams are, then it's the community's job to help you find them, right? And this is super compelling to some people, right? It's like, nobody's cared about my dreams until then, right? Like it hasn't mattered to anybody whether or not these things that are important to me are actually manifesting, right? And Twin Oaks is not doing that, right? Like I have dreams at Twin Oaks, people are like, oh, that's interesting, or that's crazy. But the small communities actually have more flexibility around this, right? Now the disadvantage of the small community, first disadvantage is lots of small communities fail. So right, like the stability that Twin Oaks has, like you don't have to worry, no stress. The other advantage of Twin Oaks is I don't cook, I don't garden. In the small community, you do whatever you need to do, right? Today's a gardening day. I'm out there trying to figure out which thing is the weed and which is not weed. I'm so bad at cook that they don't. But the small communities are more like all hands on deck, right? Like everybody's got to help do whatever it is that we happen to be doing. Whereas the big communities, there's lots of specialization. You can just stick with the thing that you want to do.
Are you not vegetarian?
I'm not currently vegetarian, but